On my wedding day, my parents didn't come. Not because of health issues, not because of an accident or any unexpected emergency. They flew to Los Angeles not to avoid me, but to host a celebration for my younger sister, Brielle, who had just reached 100,000 followers on TikTok. I found out about it roughly 2 hours before the ceremony, when a friend sent me a story: champagne, cake, confetti, and a bold sign across the table that read, "To our star, 100K strong." I stood backstage, wearing the wedding dress I had designed myself, holding the bouquet I had personally chosen, surrounded by a venue I had envisioned, from the color of the flowers to the lighting style. Every detail was meticulously planned by me, not just because I'm a wedding planner, but because I had dreamed of this day since I was a little girl. A day when my parents would look at me and say, "We're proud of you." But no one showed up. Not a single message, not a single phone call, not even a word of congratulations. I walked down the aisle under the puzzled eyes of relatives, friends, and colleagues, all of them wondering, "Where are the bride's parents?" I smiled and lied. "They're stuck on a flight." In truth, they were raising their glasses to an internet milestone my sister had achieved. And me? I was standing at the center of my own wedding, feeling colder than any winter I've ever known. And in that moment, amid the warm background music and soft lighting, I finally understood something I had refused to accept for the past 28 years. I was never a priority in this family. If you've ever lived in the shadow of a perfect younger sister, the one who's always praised, protected, and adored while you were only told to be understanding, then stay. This is the story I've never dared to tell, but today, I'm going to say it all. My name is Lana Carter. I'm 28 years old, living in San Diego. I'm a self-made wedding planner, and I just organized my own wedding, a wedding my parents didn't even bother to attend. At 18, I left home to attend college at San Diego State on a scholarship while juggling 3 part-time jobs. I've never moved back to Orange County to live with my family since. Not because I hate them, but because I learned early on that in order to have a place in the Carter family, you had to be willing to live in the background. My father, Richard Carter, is a former finance worker who took early retirement. My mother, Diane, used to be an elementary school teacher but later switched to online sales. They're the kind of middle-class American parents who care a lot about appearances. Their house is always spotless, like something out of a magazine. The staircase is lined with framed family portraits, and every Facebook post ends with a hashtag like #proudmom or #blesseddad. To the outside world, our family looks picture perfect. But in those polished photos, there's always one person shining in the middle: Brielle. Brielle Carter, my younger sister, is 23 and a rising beauty TikToker. She's beautiful, sharp, with radiant skin and effortlessly curled blonde hair that looks straight out of Pinterest. Brielle started filming skincare videos during the pandemic, and in just a year and a half, she reached 100,000 followers. Brands now send her PR boxes to the doorstep, and my mom shows her off at every family gathering as if she had just won an Oscar. Since we were kids, Brielle has always been the golden girl, the one who got praised, the one who got spoiled, the one who got forgiven. And me? I was the mature older sister. The one who had to give way, the one who wasn't allowed to feel jealous, the one who had to take care of herself. I was never jealous of Brielle. I had my own life, my growing list of wedding planning clients, a small apartment I bought myself 2 years ago, and Ryan, college boyfriend, a patient and kind man who always made me feel like the most important person in the room. We'd been in love for 6 years, and when we decided to get married, I didn't hire another planner. I wanted to craft every detail myself. From the long white lace-covered table to the dusty rose color of the floral arrangements, I did it all with one dream in my heart. For once, I wanted them to show up for me. It wasn't about needing their blessing, it was about a lifetime of yearning for them to look at me like a daughter worthy of love. But maybe I was wrong from the beginning. I think favoritism never starts out like a knife wound. It begins slowly, like water dripping onto stone. You don't notice it right away, but over time, it carves a hole deep inside you. When I was 16, I received the Student of the Year award for the entire state, a distinction given to just one student annually. The school held a formal ceremony, complete with a stage, bright lights, and roaring applause. I looked around the auditorium, scanning for my parents' faces. But the seats reserved for my family were empty. Later, I found out Brielle had her first ballet recital that same day, a small elementary school performance where she stood in the third row, flapping her arms like butterfly wings. My whole family had gone to that instead. My mom sent me a single message at 10 p.m. "Sorry, sweetheart, Brielle was so adorable today. I promise I'll get you a cake tomorrow." When I turned 18, I received a full-ride scholarship to college. It was a dream. I applied without anyone reminding me, studied for the SAT on my own, researched every financial aid opportunity by myself. I thought at the very least, my parents would drive me to move in. But no, they were busy. My mom had taken Brielle to tour an art school in Santa Barbara. The reason? It's far, she needs guidance. I hauled my suitcase onto a Greyhound bus alone, listening to music, with no hugs goodbye, no words of encouragement. 3 days later, I saw a photo of Brielle and my mom posing beside a brand new Jeep Wrangler, reward for working hard at school. I just smiled. Another quiet lesson. Being on your own was my default. At 21, I graduated college with honors, a 3.9 GPA, and a thesis paper that was featured in the department newsletter. I stood on stage to receive my diploma, looked out into the crowd, and saw empty space again. I tried to act okay, but when I got back to my apartment, my Instagram feed was flooded with Brielle. Her 5-minute prom glow-up makeup video had hit 1 million views, and my family had thrown her a party cake, balloons, candles, and the caption, "To our star, Brielle." I stared at the picture of them raising their glasses, then looked in the mirror, just a girl who had crossed a life milestone, holding nothing but a cup of instant noodles. And I think that was the first time I whispered it to myself. Brielle's wins were family wins, mine were just mine. What she accomplished was celebrated by everyone. What I worked for was invisible. No one acknowledged it. No one remembered. And I learned to swallow that truth in silence. 1 week before the wedding, I sent a message to our family group chat. Just a polite little reminder. Please double-check your flight and schedule. I've already reserved your hotel rooms. No one replied. Not a heart. Not even a quick, okay. I refreshed the chat several times, thinking maybe the signal was bad, or maybe they were just busy. But by evening, the silence was suffocating. I told myself, maybe they're planning a surprise. But the truth is, I knew. I've known the feeling of being ignored since I was 16, and this time, it returned like a ghost I couldn't shake. 3 days before the wedding, my mom sent me a single message. "Your dad's back is hurting. He probably can't make it." No questions about how I was doing, no mention of the wedding, no apology, just a brief sentence, like she was turning down a backyard barbecue, not her eldest daughter's once-in-a-lifetime day. I called. No one picked up. I sent 2 more messages. No response. A chill started growing in my chest, but I still tried to believe. Maybe they're just focused on Dad right now. They'll find a way. How could they possibly not come to my wedding? That night, the night before my wedding, I was sitting in my hotel room, going over the final photography schedule when my phone buzzed. A friend had sent me a story from Brielle's Instagram along with an angry emoji. "Lana, what is this?" I opened the story. The first image was a rooftop bar in Los Angeles, twinkling lights, silver balloons in the shape of 100K. Then came a video of my mom, wearing a red dress, hugging Brielle from behind as the two of them beamed in front of a massive cake that read, "To our queen, 100K followers." Cheers rang out. The hashtags at the bottom. Number 100K queen, number family proud. I sat still, frozen, as if the blood in my veins had stopped moving. My mother hadn't called to say she wouldn't make it to my wedding. But she managed to fly to LA. To celebrate my sister's TikTok milestone. The only message from her, arriving around 11 p.m., read, "You're married now." You'll understand how proud we are of your sister someday. I reread that line over and over, searching for a trace of care, any flicker of maternal warmth. But all I felt was cold. I deleted the reminder I'd set to call her in the morning. Deleted the message I had drafted, "I still hope you'll come." No tears, no screaming. Just a hollowness spreading from my chest, like an invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders, so heavy I couldn't lift my arms. I sat there, in my white silk robe, staring out at the glittering city lights beyond the window. And I understood, more deeply than ever, that I was never their priority. Not on the day I won that award. Not on the day I left home for college. And now, not on my own wedding day. When I walked into the ceremony the next morning, pale golden light poured across my shoulders like the gentle sun of early autumn. Everything looked perfect: white wooden chairs tied with dusty rose ribbons, baby's breath and dahlias scattered along the aisle. The soft hum of acoustic guitar floating in the air like a breath. I had designed every single detail, and now I was the bride walking through the space I once dreamed of. But with each step I took, my heart felt heavier. To the left was Ryan's family, his mother quietly wiping tears, his father resting a proud hand on her shoulder. To the right was emptiness. The seats reserved for my parents, marked Richard and Diane Carter, sat vacant, a silent reminder no one wanted to read. I clutched my bouquet so tightly my nails left marks on my palms. I smiled for the cameras, for the guests, for myself. Standing beside Ryan at the altar, he leaned down and whispered, "Where are your parents?" I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and said softly, "Stuck in traffic." A lie. The last mask I could wear to protect whatever pride I had left. Ryan didn't ask again, he just held my hand tighter. The ceremony unfolded like a flawless performance, smiles, glances, the rings, the kiss, but to me, everything passed like a disjointed dream. I was in every photo, but not really present. I stood there in the glow of fresh flowers and soft lights, but felt like a shadow, a ghost in a white dress. At one point I even wondered, if I disappeared this very moment, who would notice first? After the ceremony, while the guests moved to the evening reception area, I slipped away to the dressing room, closed the door behind me, kicked off my heels, and sat down on the bench. No one knocked. No one asked if I was okay. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. And as if things weren't cruel enough, Brielle's story was still at the top. She was live streaming, thanking her fans for helping her reach an unimaginable milestone. My mother stood just behind her, beaming like a stage light, repeating over and over, "We're so proud of our baby girl." I stared at the screen for a long while, then set the phone down. I didn't cry. I think I ran out of tears the night before. All that remained was a stillness spreading through my body like a heavy fog. On the day I was supposed to feel the most loved, I found myself sitting here, holding myself, just like I had 1,000 times before, but this time, something shifted. In the silence, I heard a faint crack somewhere deep inside, and I knew it would no longer be just an invisible fracture. Soon, it would break wide open. The reception ended around 10 p.m. As the last guest left, the paper lanterns outside were still hanging between the olive branches, glowing gently in the cool San Diego breeze. Ryan and I sat side by side on the wooden steps behind the venue, two champagne flutes at our feet, quiet like two soldiers returning from an emotional battlefield. Neither of us said anything for a long time. Ryan isn't the kind of person who rushes anything, and I knew he was waiting for me to speak first. But this time, it was him who broke the silence. He turned to me, his brown eyes serious and steady. "You don't have to pretend you're okay." I let out a dry, shallow laugh. "I'm fine. Everything went according to plan." "Lana," he said, placing a hand on my knee. "They didn't come, they didn't even call. You don't have to smile through that." I looked out at the long shadows stretching across the lawn, pressing my lips together. I was used to swallowing the hurt, used to turning the emptiness into polite silence. But this time, silence wasn't a shield, it was a bottomless pit, and I was falling deeper into it. "Do you think I'm overreacting?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. I mean, maybe they had their reasons. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. Ryan shook his head, firm. No. You're not being dramatic. You're being honest. And a few moments later, Melissa, my best friend since college, walked out still wearing the square-neck emerald green bridesmaid dress I had chosen for her. She carried 2 mocktails, sat beside me, and said nothing. Just sighed and leaned her head gently against my shoulder. I didn't want to say this at your wedding, she began, her voice light as mist. But this isn't just favoritism, Lana. It's erasure. They've erased you from your own story. You were never allowed to shine. Oz. That sentence hit my heart like a mirror shattering on the floor. I turned my face away, but the tears had already fallen before I noticed. I had tried to be strong, to stay composed, to endure to not be the complicated daughter. But the truth is, I had lived my entire life feeling like I was somehow wrong for existing. I'm not some cold, emotionally distant adult, I said, staring down at my clenched hands. I'm a child who was never properly loved. And I've carried that child with me for 28 years. Ryan wrapped his arm around me, holding me close. Melissa reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. And today, she said, you don't have to stay silent anymore. I took a deep breath, the first one in months that felt like it truly belonged to me. No more silence, I whispered, like a vow not to them but to myself. No more pretending, no more making excuses for other people. No more accepting invisibility as a default. I will never be silent again. And whatever happens next, no one will see it coming. The next morning, I woke up in our wedding bed, still scented with the faint trace of lavender from the hurried bouquet I'd arranged the night before. Ryan was still asleep, his arm draped across my waist like a silent vow. I lay there beneath the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, and for the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel ashamed of what I was feeling, anger. But not the kind of anger that screams or breaks things. It was a quiet anger, deep and precise. Like a blade pressed gently to the chest, not loud, but sharp enough to change everything. I no longer wanted to beg them to come back. I didn't need an apology. I needed the truth to be acknowledged. And I knew I wouldn't get that through a Facebook post or a tearful phone call in the middle of the night. I would do it the way I've always done everything, with structure, with proof, and with not a single crack in my logic. Early that week, I went to a small family law firm in La Jolla where someone Ryan knew from college worked. I told the story, no embellishments. I talked about abandonment, favoritism, and a college fund I vaguely remembered my grandparents mentioning back in high school, a fund they had set up for both me and Brielle with equal amounts, $25,000 each. The lawyer nodded quietly and said she'd look into it. 3 days later, she called me back. Lana, she said, her voice calm but cold as steel. Your portion of the fund was withdrawn 6 years ago. None of it went to your university. In fact, there were transfers made to a credit card in your parents' name and a tuition payment for a private art school Brielle attended for 1 semester before dropping out. I wasn't shocked. I felt relief. Because for the first time in over a decade, I had something I'd never been able to touch before: evidence. That evening, Ryan and I sat at the small dining table in our apartment, all the lights off except for the glow of the laptop screen lighting our faces. We created a folder titled The Truth, and into it, I began gathering everything I had. Bank statements from my college years showing my parents had borrowed money from my account. Purchase receipts made with my card that I had never authorized. An email from my grandparents referencing the college fund, with a blessing that each child should have equal opportunity. A screenshot of Brielle's 100K celebration story. The message my mom sent on the night of my wedding. You're married now. You'll understand how proud we are of your sister someday. We wrote a short email, polite but direct, and sent it to every relative on both sides of the family. The subject line read, "From Lana, just the truth." The body of the message was simple. I'm not sending this email to create a scandal or to demand anything. I just believe the family deserves to know the full truth about the years I was erased from every family picture. I no longer hold resentment. I only want to be seen. The attached PDF was 22 pages long. Each section was numbered, cited, clear, and free of personal commentary. After that, I wrote a letter by hand. No typing, no fancy formatting. Just a plain white sheet, clean black ink, sealed in an envelope with the words, "For Diane and Richard Carter." I asked a close friend who lived near my parents' house to place it on their doorstep early in the morning. In the letter, I didn't mention the missed dinners, the forgotten birthdays, or all the times I swallowed my tears to become the mature older sister. I didn't mention the anger. I simply wrote, "I know you may never understand, and maybe you never wanted to. But I need to say this not to blame, but to free myself. You erased me for years. Quietly, slowly, but completely. This time, I'm the one walking away. Not with anger, but with clarity. Your daughter, Lana." I sealed the letter, placed it in my friend's hands, and turned off my phone. That night, I slept deeply. And for the first time in my life, my dream didn't include anyone from my family. It was just me, standing in a field of tall grass, wind sweeping through, sunlight warming my shoulders free, whole. 3 hours after the email went out, my phone began buzzing nonstop. The first message was from my father. It was short, rigid, cold, like every word he ever said during my childhood. "Ungrateful child, we did everything for you." No questions, no use of my name, just a judgment. I looked at that message and felt nothing but a strange sense of peace. I thought I would shake. I thought I would ache. But instead, it felt like I was standing outside a house that had long since burned down. Everything now was just ashes. The next message came from my mother. She wrote a long block of text with no punctuation. I read each line like I was rereading all the years I'd been cast as the ideal daughter who had no right to complain. "Why are you airing dirty laundry? We're your family. You're making us look bad. People are calling. Your aunt is upset. Your uncle doesn't believe it. What are you trying to do, ruin us?" Not once did she mention how I might be feeling. Not a single, "Are you okay?" To her, my pain had always been an inconvenience, an embarrassment to the family. I didn't respond. I let the messages keep coming like a chain dragging behind me. I didn't even scroll to the end. I went into settings, blocked both their numbers. Then I logged out of my old email account, deleted the Facebook app, and opened a new bank account under a name only I could access. I was cutting every invisible rope that had bound me for years, each step a clean, deliberate slice. The last message came from Brielle. Her tone was different, no embellishments, no long explanations, just, "I didn't know, I swear, please talk to me." I read it over and over. For a moment, I felt my hands tremble. Brielle had always been the one who was loved, nurtured, protected. But not once did she ask if I was okay, if I was hurting. And now, with the curtains pulled back, with the spotlight no longer hers, she turned to look at me and ask, "Where were you?" I locked my phone. I didn't reply. I don't hate Brielle, but I don't owe her anything either. That week, I began therapy with a psychologist named Dr. Morgan, someone Melissa had recommended. In our first session, I didn't say much, just a few words about the wedding, the empty seat, the message that night. Dr. Morgan simply listened, then softly said, "You've been the invisible daughter your whole life, haven't you?" I nodded. And for the first time, I cried. Not because my parents didn't come, not because my sister had 100K followers, but because, finally, someone saw me. Really saw me. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something I've never had before, a life where I'm no longer the shadow of anyone else. 3 weeks after the wedding, on a cold, still Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang at my small apartment in North Park, San Diego. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ryan was away on a business trip. Melissa had texted that she was spending the weekend at her mom's. When I opened the door, standing on the front step was Brielle. No filter, no ring light glow. No filming crew or PR bags dangling from her arms. Just my sister, bare-faced, her features pale and washed out, eyes swollen and red, hands trembling slightly as they clutched the worn straps of an old canvas tote. "Hey," she said, her voice as small as a breeze slipping through a cracked window. I stood there for a moment, empty inside, then stepped aside to let her in. We didn't hug, no how are yous. No pretending. I handed her a mug of hot chamomile tea. She sat down in the single chair by the window, staring into the cup as if it might speak the words she couldn't find. I sat across from her on the sofa, watching from a distance, waiting. After a long silence, Brielle finally spoke. "I thought you liked being independent," she said, her eyes still fixed on the table. "That's what Mom always said. That you wanted to do things on your own, that you didn't want help, that you were different." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let the question hang in the air like an old wound refusing to close. Then I looked up and asked her just one thing. "Did you ever ask me?" That question fell into the room like a slow church bell echoing through an abandoned chapel. Brielle turned her face away, then covered it with her hands and cried. Not the kind of crying she might post online. Not the kind meant for attention or sympathy. But the kind that breaks when something false inside you finally gives way. She cried like a little girl who just realized she wasn't a princess, but a wall, an invisible barrier that had been used to keep me small. "I thought I was the chosen one," she choked out, her voice unsteady, like a child lost in a crowded market. "But turns out I was the shield they used to keep you hidden. They put me up front so no one would see what they were doing to you, and I let them." Ah. I looked at her, and she was no longer the TikTok queen or the doted on sister smiling too brightly in every perfect family photo. She was just a young woman, shaped by the same system that had pushed me into silence. I saw someone wounded too, but in a different way. "I didn't know," she said, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "I didn't know about the college fund. I didn't know about the loans in your name. I didn't know you were paying rent at 18. I thought you liked it that way." I nodded gently. "That's the problem, Brielle. You never knew, and you never asked. But now you do." The room fell quiet. No one apologized. No one asked for forgiveness. But I stood up, walked over, and sat beside her. We didn't speak. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she used to when we shared that white bunk bed as kids. Her back trembled slightly, and I closed my eyes, breathing in deeply. We hadn't healed everything. We hadn't unpacked a lifetime. But in that moment, I knew something had begun. Not forgiveness. But space. Space for the truth to breathe. Space for sisterhood, once misshaped by conditional love, to find its original form again. A form that was raw, imperfect, but real. And just like that, the healing began for me, for us, quietly, without needing likes, only needing to be heard. A year passed like a warm breeze, and I was no longer the woman sitting in a dressing room, knees tucked to chest, surrounded by fallen petals because my parents' chairs were empty. After that wedding, Ryan and I opened a small studio called Lantern and Lace, nestled in Kensington, San Diego, a neighborhood of white picket fences, vintage cafes, and neighbors who smile when you pass by with your dog. The studio was only about 900 square feet, but every corner was curated like a soft whisper to my childhood. At last, we have a place of our own. Ryan handled finances and tech. And me? I was the soul of every ceremony. From a lesbian bride who wanted a barefoot beach wedding to an elderly couple marrying again at 70, I listened to their stories like I was being loved all over again through them. Every bouquet I arranged, every string light I hung, was a stitch over a place in me that had once been torn. The business grew slowly, not viral, not explosive, but steady, like the heartbeat of someone who's finally at peace. And Brielle. She enrolled in a communications program at a small public college in Riverside. She no longer films TikToks, or if she does, they're simple vlogs, shots of her studying, cooking, talking about a particularly emotional therapy session. One day, she sent me a 30-second clip of herself reading by the window with the caption, "Learning to live without needing an audience." I watched it and stayed silent for a long, long time. My mother texted a few times after everything. The messages came with no subject, no greeting, no signature. They'd arrive at odd hours, as if she wrote them in the dark, hoping no one would see. They were fragments. "I'm sorry I didn't come that day," or "I didn't think things would go this far." Sometimes she blamed misunderstandings. Sometimes it was her age, her emotions being too difficult to manage. But never once did she say the 4 words I needed most. I was wrong. Not once did she admit, "I hurt you." She only regretted that things had been exposed, never that I had been abandoned. I read those texts once, then deleted them. No reply, no saving. No keeping them in my heart. Not because I was angry, but because I had stopped waiting. I was no longer that 20-something girl who believed that if she was just good enough, obedient enough, her mother would turn around and pull her into her arms. I had filed that drawer away, the one where I stored all the unmet hopes. And I had locked it with a silence I needed in order to fully live in the present. As for my father, he never messaged. Not a single word, no questions, no gestures. He remained the same, silent, rigid, unmoved like a stone on the side of the road. But I knew he had read the email. Knew he'd studied every word, every page of the file I sent. A man like him never ignored anything that might affect his image. And I knew deep in his mind I would always be the traitor. The daughter who soiled the family's reputation by daring to tell the truth. And then, 1 year after our wedding back at that same studio, Ryan and I hosted a small anniversary gathering. Just close friends, a few clients who'd become like family, and of course, Brielle and her new boyfriend, a soft-spoken sculptor. Out on the small patio behind the studio, we strung golden fairy lights from pole to tree, played slow music, and laid out a simple but cozy dinner table. Melissa brought a homemade chocolate cake, and Ryan read a poem he had written just for me, resting his hand gently on my back as I laughed until tears blurred my vision. I stood there, beneath the lights and the sound of laughter, wearing a simple off-white linen dress. There were no parents posing for photos beside me. No big speeches from the people who gave me life. But I didn't feel like anything was missing. Because I had learned how to show up for myself, day after day, without waiting for someone else's permission to take the stage of my own life. They didn't show up, I thought, as I raised my glass to clink softly against Ryan's, so I showed up for myself. Have you ever had to choose yourself even when it meant walking away from family? If you've ever lived in someone's shadow, if you've ever tried your hardest only to be dismissed as the one who doesn't need attention, I hope my story reminds you of something simple, yet deeply true. You deserve to take up space. You have the right to exist, to be loved, and to be seen not because you're perfect, but simply because you are you. If you're on the journey of learning how to love yourself, share your story in the comments below. I read every word, and every story you tell is part of this community. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe love shouldn't have to hurt to be real. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do isn't standing up to the world. It's standing up to your own family and choosing to walk away, for your own sake. See you in the next story.